You're listening to the TV Obsessive channel, presented by TVObscast.com.
Hello, welcome back to episode 95 of the TV Obsessive podcast. My name is Ryan Kirksey. I'm a writer and contributor for TVObsessive.com, and once again, joined by Cameron Crane, the executive editor for the site. We, I guess, cannot get enough Severance, so we have to go back. That's the wrong show, but we're gonna do more Severance, it sounds like.
Oh yeah, we're going to spend the latter part of the pod today talking about Severance some more in light of season 2, exploring lingering questions, some of the theories out there. At least some of the things I put on our notes are theories that I've heard from others that I don't endorse, and they don't necessarily endorse either. We'll talk about that more later. Some of these YouTube videos are like, here's a bunch of wild theories, and the person's not endorsing them. So I don't know. I guess a lot of people are doing things like we're doing today, including Ben Stiller and Adam Scott had another episode of the official podcast today. So we're not, I don't think we're breaking ground, as it were, but definitely still things worth talking about with Severance. And we talked through the season finale last week and went kind of long and still didn't hit on everything we wanted to hit on. So
That's right.
Taking some more time here in the latter part of the pod on Severance. Hopefully people enjoy that. First, as usual, chat a bit about TV, what we've been watching this week, what's been in the news that caught our eye, all that kind of stuff. It's March 28th, somehow already almost the end of March. What have you been watching this week, Ryan?
Yeah, I did. I was hearing so much about another Apple TV Plus show that's come out. That's gotten some pretty good buzz. This is the show called The Studio, starring Seth Rogen, other people that you would certainly recognize, including Catherine Hahn is in the show. Catherine O'Hara is in the show. Bryan Cranston has a really interesting role, at least in the first episode. So I checked this out, and I love it. I really, really love it. It is a satire on what it is like to work, I guess, in the movie industry. Seth Rogen plays a studio executive, and boy, it is funny, and it is kind of gloves off, no, not holding anything back about, I guess, what it's like to be in that world. And the 2 episodes that are out so far are just fantastic. I think episode 3 is coming out on Wednesday. The pilot episode was about 48 minutes, and then the second episode, which is just called Oneer, which is about a studio trying to shoot a one shot, I think is actually done as a one shot. It's about 23 minutes long, and it's just great so far. I cannot recommend it enough.
Cool. Yeah, this one was on my radar. It struck me as more of a half hour, but maybe it just is going to vary a bit. I haven't had the chance to check it out yet. I have heard mostly good things, which is cool. I'll try to find some time for it. There are some plans to potentially have some articles on TVObsessive.com, but they haven't come to fruition yet. So we'll see. I believe that's in the works from one of the writers from the site, but I'm kind of waiting. But anyway, glad to hear that you're enjoying that one. I'll have to check it out. I mean, we've covered a lot of Apple TV Plus shows on the podcast, and it's definitely a mixed bag. There are definitely shows on that streamer that I don't care for as much, but they do a lot of good stuff, honestly, in my opinion. And unfortunately, a couple of the shows they've done that I enjoyed, they canceled.
Right.
I want to talk about White Lotus a little bit. I know you're watching White Lotus. Obviously, Ryan is writing on it week to week. I am just watching it, as I posted on Blue Sky before I sat down at 9 p.m. on Sunday. It's like, time to watch White Lotus. I'm sure this will be chill and nothing bad will happen.
Yeah.
But I've definitely been really enjoying it. I mean, the series as a whole, but this season, it's like slowly starting to climax. I think there's 2 more episodes. Is that right?
2 left. Yeah.
So really curious to see what happens. And then it also got my eye in the news. Duke University not real happy with their representation in the show. I don't know any. I mean, whatever. Chill out, Duke. The guy went to Duke. He's wearing a Duke T-shirt. Any thoughts about that?
Yeah, I guess, and while we haven't seen, I mean, obviously we're not going to spoil anything. While we haven't seen Saxon in a Duke T-shirt, he is also a Duke representation on this show. Not the two best human beings in the world that are represented by Jason Isaacs and Patrick Schwarzenegger and their characters on this show. But yeah, Duke is upset because some real, I think, unstable, bordering on violent scenes happen while one of the characters wears a Duke t-shirt. And I mean, like it's a little bit of inside baseball. You and I both work somewhat in higher education. I don't know. There's a lot of other things to worry about right now, but Duke is very concerned about having someone with their t-shirt on. Yeah.
Yeah, I mostly thought it was funny. I mean, I also feel like in terms of I don't know, the cultural feeling that surrounds Duke University,
Yeah.
it actually feels very fitting to me that these characters like went to Duke, are proud Duke alumni, all of that sort of thing. Anyway, yeah, Duke released a statement about it. I'm not a lawyer, but to my knowledge, legally, they've got nothing to stand on here. I don't think you can.
No, I don't think you have to get permission to wear. I think back to this is going to really date me, and maybe we don't not supposed to talk about this show anymore, but I remember uh the Cosby Show. Bill Cosby wore a different college sweater every episode, right? I don't think you have to get permission for any of that stuff.
Yeah, I don't think you have to at all. I mean, with products and stuff too. I mean, there's some gray area, but it gets more in. I think it's more in the territory of like, do you want to piss off Apple? As opposed to there actually being legal grounds for,
Right.
Because I don't know. I think it would have to be like a defamation lawsuit or something like that. I don't know. Again, I'm not a lawyer, but I did years ago take a class on First Amendment law. And given the fact that it is a consumer product that's out there in the world and readily available, you know what I
Yeah,
mean?
exactly.
To simply show it on the screen, I don't think there's any grounds for a lawsuit or anything like that, but I guess I'm not positive. I'm not a lawyer or anything. Looking at the news this week, it's a little bit of thin. We've got a couple casting announcements we can hit on. The Malcolm in the Middle stuff's probably the most interesting to me personally. So let's start there. They recast Dewey.
Yeah, they've recast Dewey, I guess, who's the youngest of the brothers, right?
Oh yeah, right. So like I used to watch Malcolm in the Middle. Ryan not so much, as I recall.
Yeah. I've caught some of it as my son has picked up that show. But yeah, we've gotten some confirmation about original characters returning. They've recast some, including the youngest brother Dewey. There are other new characters joining this that I guess have expanded the family. We've talked about this revival a couple times before. I didn't realize it was just going to be a very short 4 episode deal, and then I guess shake your hands, you're done after that. But that was, I guess, news to me.
Yeah, it's weird because I had something of that feeling originally when we talked about it. Sorry, I was just looking up the guy's name. The actor who played Dewey, Eric Sullivan. If people don't know, he retired basically. He just hasn't acted since 2010, so it's not a huge surprise that that he's not coming back and they recast the role. But yeah, I'm almost reading this. What you say, but at the same time, it feels bigger than I thought it was going to be, right? Because like the original announcement wasn't listing everyone in the cast coming back. It wasn't like talking about how they cast an actress to play the girl who was a baby. I mean, so I really wonder what the idea is here, because with this large of a cast and going to recast Dewey and all of that, what is the idea here, and does it end up just being a short thing, or is that short thing more of a trial balloon?
Yeah, that's a great question, because this does confirm. I don't know if we have confirmed previously when we've talked about this. Frankie Muniz, Bryan Cranston, Jane Kaczmarek, now Chris Masterson and Justin Fairfield, 2 of the other 4 brothers, are here. So it very well may be. Yeah, how does it do on Disney Plus? Do people care about this? Is it interesting at all? Then is this you sort of said, a test case for something that could happen again in the future? It probably all depends on Bryan Cranston and Frankie Muniz personally.
Yeah, well, and all of them. Yeah, so it's like it's no surprise if it's just a short little thing because of the people involved, and it doesn't seem like they would exactly want to get into another long run of Malcolm in the Middle, but maybe they would because they have fond memories of working on the show or something. Who knows?
Yeah,
But
yeah.
still, yeah. What is the idea here? Why are we doing this? Narratively, I guess, right? Like, if it is 4 episodes, okay, is there an idea for a 4 episode story arc? You know,
Yeah, yeah.
um, but I was also curious about the fact that they did recast Dewey as opposed to writing him out or something. So
Yeah, that he will be in this. Yeah, I may have made this reference before, but it reminds me of when Fuller House came back on Netflix, and John Stamos and Bob Saget would just sort of every once in a while pop into the show. I don't know if they would try to go down that model, if they could get all the brothers to do a show
right,
together. But who knows? It may be completely off base, but it is just interesting they have almost everyone back at least for this 4 episode arc.
yeah, or like launch off a show with the new people they've cast who weren't in
Yeah,
the original or something like that.
yeah.
We'll see. I am curious about this. It also made me realize that although I used to watch Malcolm in the Middle, I was watching it just maybe in syndication, maybe not
hmm
even in order, just on cable. I don't think I've ever seen the finale.
Oh
So
no,
like
certainly
maybe
not.
I
No.
have to, maybe I should go revisit the finale of Malcolm in the Middle. That can be interesting. I did that. I guess it's been maybe a couple years at this point when I revisited Married with Children. I wrote a little article on the site uh, in our summer rerun series that I've tried to get going over the summer. But of course, I didn't rewatch all of Married with Children. I,
Right.
I watched like the first couple of episodes, and then I watched the very end. And it's
Yeah.
kind of an interesting experience to revisit a show. And I don't think I'd ever seen the finale of Married with Children before, which
Oh no,
was
I have not either.
that one was kind of weird because I think it actually serves as a series finale pretty well, but the show was canceled.
Oh, I didn't know that.
It's
Okay.
a it's a really weird one. Yeah, I mean, I don't know how many seasons it was like. I don't know how many examples you can think of shows that ran for more than 10 years and then just got canceled.
Okay.
Like didn't get to end on really didn't get to end on its own terms technically, although I do think that the last episode worked. Anyway, that was a bit of a tangent. Um, Other casting news, hit this really quickly. Renee Zellweger is going to be in the next season of Only Murders in the Building, which they are currently working on. This is one that they pump out pretty quickly,
They do
actually.
one of these at least every year. It just seems like they're always ready to turn out the next one when one season ends. I think it was just a couple of months ago that season 4 ended. So yeah, they're already preparing for season 5, I guess, to come out probably in the fall.
It feels like it was just a couple months ago, Ryan, but I'm sure it was like October. I'd have to look
Probably
it up,
so.
but
Probably so.
but yeah, I mean they're one of the few shows that are on a streaming service that really feels like they do hit that just yearly regular schedule. And I remember when the last season came out, I sent a DM to Felicia, who's written on the last couple seasons for TVObscast.com for us. And I was like, "Yeah, do you want to write on the new season?" She's like, "There's a new season already?" So they really do kind of pump it out there. So, but I mean, that's good. And no indication here about whether Renee Zellweger is playing herself or a new character or what. A lot of
Right.
people in the last season were playing themselves,
Yes. Yeah, I think
versions
that's
of themselves.
pretty
So
standard for that show, as I understand it. I still have not seen any.
I have not either, but I've read recaps. Yeah.
Yeah.
So Linda Cardellini, who I'm a big fan of, cast as um, Pamela, last name, in the Crystal Lake Friday the 13th prequel series. This made me feel a little bit old for one thing, Ryan.
I had a different I think reaction to this. This actually, I mean, I heard about this, knew it was coming, but maybe like you, am such a big fan of Linda Cardellini. This made me really excited to see this. I mean, I've grew up, sort of as a teenager watching a lot of these movies. Certainly, the original is a classic. I think this is going to definitely make the list for me.
Yeah, I mean it did also do that for me as well. It was like, oh
Yeah,
well, maybe for the first time now I'm actually kind of want to watch a show. So good job
Yeah.
with your casting here. It's always good when you get that kind of reaction from us. But yeah, I'm just thinking, Linda Curley, like going all the way back to like Freaks and Geeks or whatever,
Yeah.
and now no, she's the mother. Okay,
She's cast as a mom now. Yep, that's
we're not old. We're not old. We're young. Let's see what else.
I put this in our notes. Remember us talking about how Apple TV Plus was reported to be losing $1 billion a year on their streaming platform. Well, I think part of the reason why it could be attributed to things like doing glossy art dealer television shows with Adam Driver and Jessica Chastain as your stars, because they probably had to pay out the nose to get these two. But apparently, this couple is going to star in a show called The Dealer about sort of the intrigue of the of high class and high dollar art. Um, I think Jessica Chastain is signed up to star as some sort of gallery owner. Adam Driver, surprise, surprise, is a mercurial artist of some kind. And boy, I can't even imagine what it would cost to not only make but pay these two actors and actresses to be on this show.
Yeah, but that's what they always do. It seems like,
Yeah.
and what's weird is how some of them flop.
Yeah.
And I hardly remember. Like I'd almost have to go back and do a little bit of research to remind us of a couple of shows that were on Apple TV that caught our attention because they cast some big names and then like just people didn't watch it. So maybe this one will be good. Check it out.
Yeah.
When it comes out. Then you've got really.
I put this on here and then remember that I think we have talked about this before, that Netflix apparently thinks that we need a live action Scooby-Doo television show. I was thinking about our conversation last week about Looney Tunes falling off of HBO and other platforms. I don't know. Maybe this is just the age I was brought up in. I'd rather just put the Scooby-Doo library up there on Netflix. Let us be entertained by that for a while, or let us introduce that to our kids. That was the stuff that I loved. Do we need a live action version? Maybe, maybe not. I'm not the one to judge.
Yeah, I don't know. Or make more animated series,
Yeah.
potentially. I never even watched the live action Scooby-Doo movie. Did you?
No,
Was
nor
there
have
more
I.
than one? There might have been more than one.
Oh, I don't know. Oh, speaking of Linda Cardellini, she's
Yeah,
in that movie.
right. And Matthew Lillard, right?
Right. Yep.
But I recall when that was coming out, my reaction was kind of like, I don't really need a live action Scooby Doo or one. You know what I would like more is if Scooby was just a guy in a suit.
Yeah.
That would, because it's like, is it just live action? Then you got like CGI Scooby or
Right.
whatever.
That's
If they
exactly
just
what
had
it would
like a
be.
guy in a Scooby suit, that would be kind of cool.
That would be fantastic. Yeah.
Like where it's obvious, where he looks like a sports team mascot, just walking around. That would,
All right. Now you've sold me on it if that's what they do.
that's not what they're going to do, Brian.
No.
It's going to be like CGI. They're going to have someone. At best, they'll have someone on set in like a green suit that they
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
put Scooby over. I think that about covers what we caught in the news this week. Again, kind of a light week, for whatever reason. Definitely there are things coming out in the very near future, as we've mentioned before, so we can make sure that's on people's radar, right? We've got The Last of Us coming out in a couple of weeks, new season of Black Mirror coming in a couple of weeks, the new season of The Handmaid's Tale coming in a couple of weeks, the new season of The Rehearsal coming in a few weeks, and I believe
Last time
all
we
the
ran through this list, we forgot Andor. I don't want to forget Andor, season
new
2,
season
April
of
20,
Andor coming
22nd.
in however many weeks. But see, now you kind of messed it up because I'm not sure if we have someone writing on Andor for TVObscast.com.
Ooh.
All of the other ones I mentioned, we do have plans in place.
Trying to think. All right, we're gonna have to talk offline if I can do
Well,
that
we'll talk
that
off
and
the air
Last of Us.
about Andor. That's fine. We do have an article on the first season of Andor written by Clay Dockery if people want to check that out. Well, let's get to Severance. Yes.
Do it.
All right.
Let's do it.
So again, we are here revisiting season 2, it's kind of a post-mortem, if you will. I don't know. We're going to be talking about various theories out there in the world, questions that we have, pulling on others a bit, talking about predictions, all that good stuff. So definitely spoilers on the table for everything in Severance and beyond. It's like spoiler warning for some YouTube channels also, I guess.
Yeah.
But okay, we'll pop a little bit of music in here and be back with you in about 10 seconds.
Okay, we are back to talk about Severance Season 2, questions, theories, predictions, things to look forward to as we wait for Season 3. Just as a quick recap of where we are and how Season 2 ended. As the season of Severance came to a close, we saw Cobell and Devin come up with a plan to help Mark S. save Gemma. We saw James Egan tell Helly R. that he sees Kier in her. Lumen management, such as Mr. Drummond, Dr. Maurer, gathered to see Mark complete the Cold Harbor file. Helly and Dylan trap Mr. Milchick in a restroom and then recruit a marching band to their any rights cause. Lauren and Mark killed Mr. Drummond before the goat sacrifice ritual. Mark S. did rescue Gemma from the testing floor after completing Cold Harbor, but refused to leave the severed floor with her, instead running off with Helly R. to some kind of unknown future. Meanwhile, Irving, still off on a train in parts unknown. Dr. Ragabi has not been seen in several episodes. We don't know what Miss Cobell's plan is ultimately. Rickon must still be working on his book. We haven't seen him in a while. Miss Swan has been shipped off to Svalbard. Any number of other little tiny details we may be forgetting. So many questions left outstanding. So many things to talk about. What's the one big question or idea you want to start with?
So I want to start with Helly. Just to make sure everyone knows what we're doing here, we kind of agreed that what we're going to do on this week's podcast is to not only talk about lingering questions and theories that we have, but also try to gather them from the world a bit. I'm sure we're not being comprehensive here. I did watch various YouTubers who, I have been watching some of these folks along the way and never mentioned them. I had the idea of, that maybe we want to cite sources. I don't know if that's quite going to work though, because for the most part, I don't have people endorsing these theories,
Right.
but more doing what we're doing in terms of raising the theory and talking about it or what have you. So,
And so many of these ideas are so proliferated everywhere. I mean, it'd be hard to give original credit to who came up with this theory.
right. But like if someone was endorsing it, if someone was saying like, I believe this is true, here's my argument.
Yeah.
That's not so much what's happening, but I'll give a quick shout out to a couple YouTube channels, Geek Academy. I enjoy Pete Peppers, Miscellaneous Gab. I also watched a Think Story video on this one, which is one of those like 25 wild theories about Severance. Okay, so those are my sources. Those are, I don't know if you have any you want to mention before we get going.
Oh gosh, any number, specifically thinking about the official
Yeah, that too.
Severance podcast. I'd have to pull together a list. Maybe I'll try to do it for our page for this podcast. I've probably tried to catch at least pieces of 10 or 12 different podcasts this week, people talking about it, people theorizing about it, looking at Reddit threads. So it's just kind of all over the place, but I'll try to collate something together for that.
That's fine. Again, I mean, it seems to me like I would feel most obligated to cite a source if it really was like this is this person's theory that they laid out,
Yeah.
whereas most of these are not quite that, at least in terms of things that I've read. Like you could probably find someone on Reddit who's laying out the argument or whatever, I suppose. Regardless, let's start with Helly because this one pissed me off. I want to start with the theory that makes me angry. That could also be true. The point is just that I will be mad if it is true. And this is the theory that at the end of season 2, that it's Helena, Egan, and not Helly. What do you think about this one, Ryan?
Hogwash, basically ridiculous. That's my sort of initial impression, and I think that there's an intention of why Jaime Egan was on the floor talking to her specifically as Helly R to sort of ground us in the fact that that's who that is. Now, could that have changed in the moments in between that conversation and when we see her with Mark later? Sure, that could have happened. But if we have Jaime Egan coming to her and saying, "You, Helly R, I see Kira in you," that at least tells us that she was on that floor working with Mark at some point during this whole process. And I'm just choosing to believe, I guess, that that's the person who it is at the end.
Okay, so I'll make the case.
Okay.
And actually, I feel like, well, I saw various people talking about the possibility. I don't know that they would, I don't know that any of them quite made the case as well as it started forming in my own mind, for whatever that's worth. Because it did seem like a lot of people were
Hmm.
somewhat in line with what you were saying, suggesting like, oh, maybe something happened in between what we saw where she became. No, I mean, I think that if there were any chance that this were actually the case, it would have to be Helena all throughout
Mm.
the events of the finale, except for what you mentioned with Jane. Now,
Yeah, yeah.
I'm pretty sure that was that the previous day or was that the beginning of this day?
I thought that
Mm,
that was all arriving on the same day. I thought it was right before Mark came in and finished
I think it
Cold
was
Harbor, but I could be wrong.
I think it was the previous day, right? I
Okay,
think that
okay.
that is in, parallel with when Mark is in the cabin on the previous day. Okay, I'd have to double check
Okay.
that because that could be of some importance to how I'm thinking about building this theory, which I do not endorse and do not want to be true.
Hmm.
But so if that was the previous day, which is what I think, and you have James telling Heliar, Danny Heliar, that he doesn't love his daughter, the Audi Heliar,
Yeah.
but he sees the fire of Kier in her or whatever, right? Now I'm imagining that Audi Helena is watching or watches later, as we saw her do earlier, watching footage of stuff going on the severed floor, right?
Yeah.
And I mean, look, maybe every day she's been watching to see what her Annie has been getting up to. I mean, wouldn't you?
Mhm.
I would if I were
Yeah.
in her position, right? So, what if, in light of that, on the next day, she decided, screw this, I'm not going to go back in severed. I'm going to use my power to go back in with the Glasgow block in place.
Yeah.
Next bit of evidence. When Helly gets off that elevator, there's no ding.
Correct. Yeah.
Is that a clue? You know, you could definitely factor that in here. Next thing, all right, and this is where I think it's important that if this were the case, in order to be able to defend it, sort of narratively or artistically, it has to be her all day.
Hmm.
When they are in the MDR office and they're talking about what Mark should do, Helly says, "But I'm her,"
Yeah.
twice. What if she's just straightforwardly telling the truth, right? What if she's not saying, "But I am the innie of the Audi Elena"? What if she's literally saying, "But Mark, look, I'm her again. I'm not I am her." So all of this would require, though, that Helena Egan, the Audi, has
Hmm.
come around to want to functionally be her innie
Yeah.
and come around in a way sort of against Lumen and on DeMarc's side, and I hate this, but that's the only way in which I could see it kind of making narrative sense.
Yeah. See that what you're talking about, that's sort of the piece of the pie that tastes best to me, right? The idea that Helena wants nothing to do with her father, wants nothing to do with Lumen, would almost prefer to have this different life, this life that is more segmented away from the pressures, the whatever it is that she faces as Helena. So I can see that and understand that perspective.
But
It does complicate things that at the Ortbo, Mark couldn't tell a difference and, has fallen in love with and has been intimate with Helena and not with Helly, right? That does complicate things.
yeah, well, and further, I really think the reason why I say this theory makes me angry and I don't want it to be true is I really feel like if this ends up being the case, man, unless they manage to really, really pull it off well,
Yeah.
or even if they do, I just feel like it would undermine the ending of season two.
Yeah, I,
It
I
would undermine the emotional stakes of it and all of that
I
for me.
completely agree because we've heard Dan Erickson say this week on several things. It was always the intention to get to this point where Mark and Helly run off together. Now that just could be sort of putting up a smokescreen and sort of trying to divert us away from what actually happened. But to say that was your point, and then we find out, 2 years from now, actually that was never the point. It was always a point to do something else. That would be a little bit, I think, disingenuous. Not that they care about that, but I see what you're saying.
Yeah, or like I can't rule it out entirely as I've thought it through. Which another reason why this one sort of made me angry is I did not think about this at all until I
Yeah.
heard someone else say it. Right,
Yeah.
like what wasn't on my mind at all until I heard someone else say it, and my first reaction was like, no, because I think it would undermine the emotional stakes and everything of the season two finale. But thinking it through, and as I just laid out the case, I could see a way in which potentially it could work, but only if it is along the lines of, think about it, like Helena Egan's watching the footage, seeing her father tell her Annie that he doesn't love her. And now her reaction is, well, you know what? Screw you.
Yeah, exactly.
And I've only been going along with all of this through those social pressures, those familial pressures, all of that. Screw you, screw Lumen. I also see like a purer form of myself in my innie. I'm just going to try to like let go of all of those kind of repressive social expectations, and I'm going to go take her place.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, if it
But
were
but
Helena
so then,
scheming, then I'd be really, really unhappy.
yeah, but then yeah, this leads into another question, which we can get into later. Just yeah, I'm very intrigued by this theory, but I think that we're going to be right that this is Helly.
I hope so. Yeah,
Yeah.
I do. So again, don't want it to be true. We could spend more time on it, but let's move forward. Where would you like to go next in terms of?
How about one of my favorites that I've heard sort of percolating this week? We've talked before about, in season one, there's Mr. Grainer, there's Mr. Drummond in season two, but there's not much other security going on in this, sort of high tech, high pressure, got to protect our investment environment here. What do you think about the theory that all along Lumen was planning for, hoping for there to be some sort of uprising or rebellion from the innies, and this is all just part of the big experiment, and they actually do have a plan to sort of squash this, right? There's the innies rights, there's people rising up, we've got a band on our side, we've got the mammalian nurturables, but really in actuality, we wanted to see what would happen when we push people to their limits and they start to rebel.
It's hard for me to buy it because Drummond's dead, and I don't think that would be part of the plan.
Definitely not.
Maurer's freaked out.
Yeah.
Um, Jane Egan is, um, yelling cuss words into his camera.
Yeah.
So, I don't know. I mean, could it theoretically be possible, the board, whoever the board is, that's clearly the top of the hierarchy.
Mhm.
That was another question we can kind of tie in here along the way, I guess. One theory out there is that the board is like a motherboard and somehow has the digital consciousnesses of CEOs past. Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know. Um, who is the board? I mean, that's just a big question. So,
Yes. Yes.
could there be some way where you could tie those things together? And this is all part of an experiment, I suppose, but I kind of don't think so.
Yeah. They talk so much in season one, at the beginning of season two, about this illusion of freedom, or sort of the greatest prison is the idea that you're free, or that you have some sense of your own agency or freedom. I don't think this is sort of an allowed or controlled environment or experiment that they're running here. I think this is truly we just never expected that people that we have been controlling this entire time would say, you know what, we are our own selves and we're going to rise up. They just never expected that to happen, at least at this level.
Yeah,
They certainly have had ways to deal with individuals who do certain things or have sort of go off script. But in terms of everybody, the entire floor, rebelling, no, they're not prepared for this.
Yeah, and the OTC at the end of season 1 messed things up because of the way now that any mark and outie marker have sort of shared information in an indirect way, but that I certainly I can't see where they would just be okay with Gemma getting away. I think they really did care about
Yeah.
Cold Harbor and all of that, right? But we could tie this into another theory. You floated something like this, and I guess
Okay.
there's a big question to me about how exactly we might want to put it. But I do think there may be something here, and this would be it's often phrased as the theory that everyone in the town of Kier is severed or something like that. You floated, I mean, I don't know if you'd want to put it that way, but something you did say on a previous podcast was more like, maybe everyone in the town is also cut off from the world or something. So I don't know. How would you want
Yeah.
to put the idea?
And I've been thinking more about it as we saw Chakai Bardo and what they were doing with Gemma and sort of the 24, 25 controlled environments that they put her in, for different levels of severance for different things. But just that the idea that when they go up that elevator, that they're not actually free, that this is just
Yeah.
another layer of everyone's severance. And there's been sort of these things where this is not exactly gone to form since we first brought it up, but this idea that everywhere you go, there's just not many people around. The idea that everything is completely dated, right? That we're not this is not an advanced technological society that they are living in.
Well, except they have smartphones, right? So,
Who has smartphones?
okay, fair.
Elena has a smartphone. I think we've seen, well, who had the smartphone in episode 9 when Mark was calling
Yeah,
Milkshake?
doesn't Mark have a smartphone there?
Yeah, that was either Mark's or Cobell's. I don't know.
Yeah, I think it was Mark's. I think it was in the car ringing.
Yeah, but the overarching theory is that Kier, which is, we're dealing with, they've talked about real states, but there is no real Kier and no real PE, I think is the abbreviation for the state that they're in when they get their mail. So is this sort of a fabricated environment where they're actually still severed and not truly free when they leave Lumen?
Yeah, I think something like this could be the case and could be really interesting. I don't know if I quite think that it is that everyone in town is severed. I don't know quite how to put my thought, but it's something like maybe the town is still a part of the office, something like that is more what I think. Like, you're not really outside of Lumen. I mean, we're already keyed into that a little bit because it's a Lumen town. It's named after Kier Egan and all of that. The only place we've seen is when Cobell went off to Salt's Neck.
Yeah.
I get the feeling that within the world of Severance, Kier is also a bit geographically isolated. I don't know where we are.
Right.
It is noteworthy that in Chakai Bardo, we saw other seasons because,
yeah,
for a while I was thinking like maybe we were the Arctic Circle or something, but we saw, like summer and fall mixed in there. So,
I will say,
I don't know.
Chakai Bardo throws a lot of wrenches into this theory because obviously you see all of these people milling around this college campus.
Yeah,
I get the impression that Mark and Gemma are both, living in this area pre-Gemma's disappearance, pre-Severance, pre-Lumen. And so, they don't seem to have any effects or knowledge of, things being done to them before this. So it's not like Mark has moved to a new state when Gemma passed away and now he works at Lumen. They also still seem to be in the same area. So there's a lot of things that point to this probably not being true, but who knows?
Yeah. I think you mean like he did move into a new place, right? He moved
Yes.
into the Lumen housing complex or whatever.
Yeah.
Okay, well, let's go a step more absurd or outlandish. Apparently, some people theorize that Rickon and his friends are goat outies.
Have you've heard the bird attacking the back of the head theory? Is that what you're referencing? Yeah.
Yeah. It's not a bird. It wasn't a bird. It's actually from the Severance chip somehow. Blah blah blah.
Yes,
Rickon's got a bunch of goat stuff.
in the first, was this from the first dinner party? All the way back in season one. I can't remember what the exact episode was.
Yeah, there was something in there. Yeah.
Yeah, but one of Rickon's friends talks about a bird that they own that um, attacked them in the back of the head, and that's why they have holes in the back of their head. So does that
Rebecca, I
actually mean
believe.
that this? Yeah, Rebecca. Yeah, that she actually severed, but she doesn't realize that she's severed.
And like part of the theory is that their names are weird for this reason, that he's actually Rick N or was Rick N, like Mark S.
Yeah,
But then, it's like, so however you put this exactly, like they're severed or used to be severed and don't know it anymore, or but people have also pointed out there's a lot of like goat iconography around Rickon. Um, there are those who are taking this in a different direction, of course. During season one, even people were speculating like maybe Rickon's a secret Egan. I
yes,
don't know.
yes. There,
I
I
mean,
will. I'm remembering something specifically that I listened to this week, so we'll give it credit. This was Dan Erickson doing an interview on the Prestige TV podcast, and they asked him to, can you confirm or deny anything about questions that people have? And he got on. He said, "I can confirm that Rebecca does have a real bird, and that bird is very aggressive." He said, I will not deal with slander that there is no bird. There is a bird out there." Now, he said, "I will not confirm or deny if she is severed, but I can confirm that there is a bird."
yeah, I actually listened to that too. That was amusing.
Yeah.
So I don't know about all of this, but what I find myself more curious about, as I mentioned to you, is I did listen to the audiobook of the UUR that's out there. It's not a complete book. Like part of me
Mhm.
does wish that they would finish the whole book and like actually publish it where I could buy a hard copy and put it on my bookshelf.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, but so I listened to the audiobook, which is read by Michael Chernus. So come on, you know.
Yeah.
And but the biggest thing that stood out to me is it's kind of subtle, and maybe it's just a joke about his kind of faux erudite kind of demeanor, but he gets absolutely every fact wrong. Anytime he mentions anything that is a fact you could check, whether it's about like science or literature
Right.
or
Right.
but it's always like a subtle slippage, very much akin to how he says in the series, a Trojan's horse.
Trojan's horse.
He's
Yeah.
just like
Yeah.
a little bit wrong. But it really started standing out to me because I don't know, I got the cultural knowledge. He's like a little bit wrong about absolutely everything. So is that just a joke? Is there any clue? I think it might just be a joke in a
Yeah.
similar way, like the dinnerless dinner and things like this. I don't know,
Just a
man.
commentary on people who, I mean, I've known people like this. I'm sure you have as well. People who are know-it-alls and have the answer to everything. So the guy who has the answer to everything, but everything is a little bit wrong. You can't get anything right.
Yeah, I mean, my reaction has always been like, "Oh yeah, I've lived in Brooklyn too." You
Yeah.
know, it's like, or people are like, "How are Devin and Rickon together?" I'm like, "Well, you haven't known a couple like that somehow."
Yeah.
So I always took it more as a critique of that kind of like Brooklyn bougie bohemian, whatever the term is that people used to use. But yeah. Anyway, more about Rickon. You want to talk more about Rickon? You think about
I'm
this as
good.
a dangling
I'm good
thread?
on I'm good on the Rick in front.
I presume he's still out there. It is true he kind of disappears in the last couple episodes,
Yeah.
and I do wonder like what's the state of his relationship with Devin? Because the last
I
time we saw
agree.
Rickon, she was calling him out for selling himself out in terms of writing the book, rewriting the book for Lumen.
He's having to do all that on his own now. So that's what's taking him so long. That's what took him out of the story.
Yeah. So we'll see. Talking about innies and the idea of everyone being in severed or whatever. Tie this in. This is a question that I have. In the season 2 finale, Maurer, as he's running towards to try to stop Mark and Gemma, yells, "You'll kill them all." I
Mm-hmm.
don't believe we talked about this last week. Who
Yeah.
do you think he's referring to?
Oh boy. I kept the thought that kept coming back, and whether or not this is anywhere close, I have no idea, but just kept coming back to the idea of what are Helly, Irv, Dylan working on? Is it people? Is it other subjects? Are there people down there that are also being, their data slash consciousness is being refined? There's one theory out there that, Mark and Gemma were chosen because of their close connection. As sort of, does it happen more efficiently, more effectively? Does it happen better because, someone like that does it versus, an A and B test where, Dylan's refining someone he doesn't know. And so is it just as effective, is it just as efficient? Sort of what's the test out there? So are they talking about the subjects? I mean, I don't know who else them would be in this scenario.
You know what I think? And there are a couple of possibilities, and it's an interesting question. But the most straightforward reading I could offer here is I think he's talking about all of the personalities in Gemma's chip.
Yep.
Um,
Good thought. Yep.
that he's in love with, of course.
Yeah.
You'll kill all the versions of her, right? If we're losing that chip, which is, I mean, part of it's really disgusting because they were planning to kill the physical woman anyway, right? So he's not actually referring to the physical woman who is Gemma. He's referring to like all the personalities in the chip somehow.
Yeah.
But is that how it works? So if that is how it works, then I mean it's kind of a big clue. Could he
And
mean?
is that an unintended consequence if you're trying to just create a chip that can sever specific things in certain circumstances? Do you, by doing that, then create a different personality for each person that is severed in that line of 25 things or whatever?
Yeah. So I'm not positive. It
Yeah.
did occur to me along the way here that any Mark doesn't seem terribly concerned about killing all of those innies. He has a general concern, but I mean, I guess, it makes sense. It makes enough sense,
Yeah.
right? I mean, like Jem has been held prisoner,
Yeah.
and so even
Well,
if,
I'd love to talk about Gemma a little bit.
yeah,
First question is the Gemma that's down on the testing floor who's not in one of the 25 rooms, the same Gemma that went out the escape door or the exit door on the severed floor. Those are the same Gemma, right? They both know Mark. They both recognize Mark.
I believe
Um,
so. When she's
okay.
outside of the door, when she's
Yes,
outside of us.
outside of the door, right. So she's clearly one of the 25 personalities when she's in one of the rooms. She
Yep.
is Miss Casey when she's on the severed floor. But when she's not in one of those rooms on the testing floor, and when she's outside the exit door on the severed floor, that's the same Gemma. I mean, I think that's the case. I just want to sort of set that baseline.
Yeah, I believe that's true. And I would just say like,
Okay. Okay.
howdy Gemma, or just,
Yeah.
Gemma.
And this was the thing
Um,
that we brought up last week. I'm just maybe I'm missing some of the logistics or layout of the building, but I'm not convinced that Gemma is yet safe or free, like maybe Mark S was hoping she would be once he got her out that door. She's Gemma, but is she gonna walk 20 feet the other way and find Devin? I'm just not convinced of that yet.
yeah, I mean, there's definitely space for them to go another way. It does seem like any Mark has to be saying, well, this is my compromise. And I'm imagining maybe they didn't even really talk about that. He
Yeah.
just made the demand, put me back on the severed floor. But when it comes down to it, he's willing to say, like, yes, I want to free Miss Casey. And it is not okay what they are doing to this woman down there.
Hmm.
And I'm on board with freeing her for sure. But now you're out the door, you're on your own, you know.
Yeah. I,
Um,
I mean, I think that's a fair point because he knows as Mark S, if he went out the door, he would not come back in because he would be there with
yeah.
Gemma. And that's sort of like this is the best I can do scenario. Right? I can't go any farther with you. I can't go up the elevator. I can't go out the door. And so yeah, I've gotten you where, I told them I would, or where I told myself that I would. And so yeah, you're on your own. Good luck getting out of the building. I know if you go up the elevator, you're gonna run into what's his name up there. He's probably gonna stop you. So maybe out the door is the best scenario to get out the building.
Yeah, I'm not positive, that we've seen exactly what her path would be to get out of the building.
Yeah.
But as I noted to you last week, there does seem to be a meaningful lack of security, as it were,
Yeah.
particularly of people who know who she is and would
Yes.
recognize that she's not supposed to leave. Because
Right.
I don't exactly think your average Lumen security guard would be like, oh, hey, that's the woman they're secretly keeping on the severed floor.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, so I tend to think she'll be able to get out, but we'll see. We'll see. I'm sure that season 3 will pick up kind of right there,
Yes.
you
Yeah.
know.
I certainly hope so. It would be it would be a little discouraging to me if it was just like 4 days later and Gemma and Devin are there hatching a plan to get back in or something. I'd like to see the immediate repercussions of all this.
I think it has to be, because even though I've already speculated about the idea of, Occupy Lumen, to be
Hmm.
clear, I don't necessarily think that Mark and Helly have come to that quite yet. Like,
Right.
I think that when any Mark, he's choosing Ellie, and it is more along the lines of, I don't want to die. I don't want to cease to exist. I want more time with this woman that I love, even if that is 5 minutes,
Yeah.
you know. Um, but when they start to think it through, they're going to have to like occupy Lumen. So I mean, it feels to me like it has to pick up pretty immediately,
Yeah.
because if they leave and become their outies, then it kind of feels to me like the story's over,
Exactly.
because why would
Exactly.
Mark ever go back in there, and so on and so forth, right?
Yeah.
Um, I know that you've got something of a heart out today, but let's be sure. I think, okay, let's talk about Cobell.
Yes.
What do you make of the theory that some people have that she might possibly be Mark's mother?
What evidence do we have to think that that might be the case, or
She
evidence
cares
against it?
about him, you
Yeah.
know. Why was she doing this stuff, pretending to be Mrs. Selvig? She, has experience with babies. I don't know how much you read into
Do we have
that.
a timeline of when she started working at Lumen, especially on the severed floor? Was it before Mark got there?
I'm pretty sure that it was, so she was already
That's just a
there.
coincidence that,
Or no, I'm imagining she brings Mark in.
well, no, I mean, a coincidence that Jim and Mark are the people that they find out that they want, or maybe if she is, she sort of points them in the direction of Gemma and Mark once they start giving blood and taking fertility tests and all that.
Yeah, I mean, maybe it's all scheming, way in the background of getting Gemma and Mark involved, and then kidnapping Gemma, and I don't know. Anyway,
Yeah.
some people theorize that Cobell might be Mark's mother, and I don't know that there's a lot of great evidence for it. I suppose the only thing I wanted to say about this is I have heard multiple people push back on the basis of the age of the actors. At one level, I do think that's fair, right? Like Patricia Arquette's only a few years older than Adam Scott, but that doesn't necessarily mean the characters are the same age,
Yeah, I don't think that's how
Um,
they're positioning it on the show, that they're close to an age.
I think that Mark Scout reads as a character. I think he reads as younger than early 50s.
Yes. Oh, absolutely. I
Right.
would say they want him to be in his 30s.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. And on the other side of things, um, Miss Cobell might read as older than Patricia Arquette is. I think she might be like 56 or something like this.
Correct. Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I recall in one of the, I think it was on the official podcast when they had Patricia Arquette on, like, I think it was her idea for Miss Cobell's hair to be gray. She's like, I feel like this woman's hair should
Mhm.
be gray or whatever,
Yes. Yeah.
So I feel like there's a way in which Cobell reads as older than Patricia Arquette, and
Yeah.
Mark Scout reads as younger than Adam Scott. So if you're imagining something like Jane Egan impregnated Miss Cobell when she was a teenager, and Mark is the child, it could work. I don't necessarily
Yeah.
think it's true. I don't really think it's true, but it is a theory that's out there. I wanted to hit
Well,
on.
what is going to be true in future seasons is the idea of bringing Devin to the birthing cabins and Cobell saying she's one of James. That it is certainly going to be true that some people out there in this universe that we know are a descendant of Jaime Egan and not just Helena. I mean, that certainly is going to be the case, I believe, since they opened that door.
Yeah, and then they double down on it by having Jane Egan say, "I sired others in the shadows." And then, I mean, there are also these questions like, who is Cobell's father? Who is Mark's parents at all, Mark and Devon's
Yep.
parents, we don't know, and so on and so forth. Similarly, in the other direction, of course, there's the theory that Hallie is pregnant or what have you. We have talked about that before. I don't know if it's much of a theory, as it were.
Yeah.
One question I had was whether they could do the OTC on Gemma. I think someone brought that up. I can't remember who I was watching who
This is a
brought
great
that
question.
up.
If they can locate where she is, I'm glad you put this on here. If they can locate where she is, find some way to get her isolated, turn her on, they can just lead her right back into Lumen. She would follow them, presumably as
As Miss
Miss Casey,
Casey?
right? Yeah.
As Miss Casey? Yeah, maybe Casey definitely seems very
Yeah.
pliant, very, very,
You got
passive.
what happened at the end of Chikai Bardo? They just tell her, "Oh, you got lost as part, when you were looking at an art installation or something here. Let me help you get back to the floor," and they can just do that again.
Yeah, yeah. So another reason to occupy Lumen. Hashtag occupy Lumen. Uh you can't let them get the control of the OTC,
Right, right, exactly.
So um let's
We
see. You've got
should
a couple other things. What else do you want to hit on before
we
we're
should
out of
make
time here?
sure before we wrap up that we at least have a short conversation about Milchick and where do we think he
Okay.
heads from here? Because I think Ben Stiller and Dan Erickson have had some interesting thoughts this week about how they're not, it's not clear where his motivations are. Dan Erickson talked about how sometimes before you break away from something, you hold on to it the tightest. So after this incident where he's locked in the bathroom and sort of sees this group of people turn against him, is he now more pro Lumen than ever before, or is he ready to take some of these slights and disservices and ways that they've mistreated him and say, okay, I'm part of the Occupy Lumen movement now,
Or what if he just quits?
or just quits? Yeah,
You know what I mean? He's like, screw this. I'm gonna go get on my motorcycle. I'm gonna go.
yeah. I was gonna
I
say,
I am
turn in your leather jacket and motorcycle, and here's your final paycheck.
People have been talking about this a little bit. We've never seen Milchick at home or anything like that. And just put it out there. I imagine Seth Milchick at home, like listening to Miles Davis and making himself a gourmet dinner for one. Definitely single. Definitely single.
Definitely, absolutely,
Um,
100%. Yeah.
I won't speculate on his sexuality or anything, but definitely I think like he's the kind of guy who listens to good jazz and he eats good food, and
Yeah.
he watches like the films of Jean-Luc Godard. He's a sophisticated guy. I love Jack. It is like it does all that track.
Do
But
you,
yeah,
just as a quick aside, do you think there's anyone who has done more for their career than Tramel Tillman in this show?
oh no, because he's just amazing. He just steals the
He is.
show.
I mean, he's 2 years away from being an A-lister that everyone has heard of at this point.
Yeah, he's great. So I don't know what Milchek does next. That was your question, right?
Yeah.
Definitely season two has laid the ground with him being kind of torn. We've said some things on the podcast here talking about him being in that kind of middle management position.
Yeah.
And that's where I think it actually could make sense for him to quit, right?
Yeah.
Because he's being left in a situation where now he's the only one, and they're going to put all of this pressure on him to get this any uprising under control or whatever. Um, or maybe he does say, okay, well, I'm gonna actually side with the innies here. I suppose that's a possibility. I don't
Yeah.
know. It'll be really interesting to see because another question you put on our sheet is about Cobell's endgame, and that's relevant too, right? I mean, I know we talked about this last week, and people can refer back to that for maybe a longer version of what I'm saying, but I'm definitely still suspicious of her and what is she up to and what does she want. So how does that all factor in?
Yeah.
Now we've talked about where does Milchick stand in the power struggle or structure of Lumen? Where does Cobell stand? And
Yeah.
where does Helena stand potentially, if that first theory we talked about has anything to it at all?
Where I'm placing my bets, if I had to, for the next season, is Cobell is now anti-Lumen, has her own agenda to sort of tear that place down. Milchick, you need beyond just the corporation, you need an antagonist. Milchick is sort of this makes him more bought in, or they need him to do something to to make sure that the innies are not taking over things as they are clearly wanting to.
I think more the other direction. Cobell is the villain.
Mm.
And even in terms of what I just said, I realized, look, if it is Heliar, the innie, well, then she needs to stay on the floor, as we talked about before. So she's neutralized. Helena's neutralized one way or the other, right? That leaves Milchick, Cobell, Jane, Mauer, the board, the nurse played by Sandra Bernhardt, who somehow we've never talked about. That's such an oversight. So it's a huge apology. She does a great job.
She does.
But it's not a lot, right? So I'm more imagining like, okay, well now Cobell comes back and says, look, I'm the only one who can handle this. I'm the one who invented Severance. I'm the one who understands what's going on. You need to put me back in charge of the company now, or you're in trouble.
I can see that. I can see that happening, certainly.
Whereas Milchick's more, he's either held hostage on the floor in some kind of middle management state trying to play negotiator, or maybe quits or something, right?
Yeah.
That's what I think.
Well, here's hoping we don't have to wait 3 years to find out.
Lots of indications that we won't, that they're already getting to work. So as long as everything goes well, and there's no world-ending catastrophe or anything like that, hopefully we'll get it. I don't know. I'm not going to be as optimistic as to suggest next year or but like maybe January 2027. How about that? That wouldn't be too bad.
Yeah. Hey, there was something interesting in the official podcast that came out today where Bensler was talking about the fact that after it had taken them a year and a half to make some section of the episodes, 7 or 8 of the episodes, he realized just how much time and effort and energy it takes to do this the way they want it to. So this is not a, we're going to pump it out in 6 months show. So yeah, it's probably early 2027.
Yeah, I would guess. And I know that we need to run here. I do want to just very quickly say something about the man in the hallway in season 2, episode 1, who's played by the same actor as the Shadow Mark, and just all of that stuff. I don't even have much to say about it, but particularly thinking back in light of the season finale, these things strike me as seeds that they've planted that haven't sprouted yet. Like what's going on here, particularly with the fact that they put the guy in the hallway in the season premiere. And then didn't really return to that at all. Almost like, you need to go ahead and forget about that unless you're sicko obsessive or whatever. But all right, so it's been great.
Yeah.
I think we'll wrap it up here.
Love talking about this show. Hopefully it's not too much longer before we can do it again. Yeah,
indeed. All right, so we'll leave it there. Thanks as always for listening. We'll be back next week. We're going to start talking about Black Mirror in anticipation of season 7, which comes out on April 10th. And we're planning to do some podcast episodes on the new stuff. But first, next week, we're going to do a podcast episode on the old stuff. Perhaps in particular, USS Callister, which we know there's going to be a sequel to, and maybe some other things that seem like, the trailers making us think of and stuff like that. So hopefully you'll join us for that. Thanks as always. Thanks as always for listening. If you enjoyed the podcast, please do leave a good rating, review, all that good stuff. If you're on YouTube, hit the thumbs up, subscribe to our YouTube channel. Check out TVObscast.com. You can follow the site on social media, search for TV Obsessive, and we'll see you next week.
All right. Looking forward to it. See you then.